Alright, welcome back. This is What If Deku was Shirou Emiya Part 2. So, where we left off on the last video, it was, Deku, he had just saved Suyu from a group of guys that were bullying her, picking on her, harassing her, shit like that. And so, now is the day of the entrance exam. Deku, he's waking up, he's making himself some breakfast, and, he gets a call. He answers, it's from the clock tower. And they're saying, if you wanted to go to UA, you could have told us. We could have got you in through recommendation. We do know some heroes that are pretty high on the list. A recommendation from that would have got you in easy. He says, plus, there's no reason for you to really do the entrance exam. You're taking a risk here, exposing that you're a mage. And Deku's like, I know you guys could have got me in, but I need to prove to myself that I'm worthy of even getting in. And that is alright, well, remember, don't do nothing that'll draw too much attention to you. And he's like, yeah, I got you. And he hangs up, and he's like, man, those motherfuckers are pesky as hell. So, he gets dressed, he heads over there. He's waiting in line. He's seeing a lot of people, but he's really not, gonna be talking to many people. All he's wearing is like some blue jeans, a long sleeve shirt, some sneakers. That's pretty much it. A pretty casual look. And, nobody's really giving him too much attention right now. So he's not gonna have a run-in with Ida at all, or with Bakugo, because Bakugo doesn't even recognize him at this point. He just remembers this kid of being, his name was Izuku Midoriya, and he moved off all of a sudden. And so, that's pretty much that. So Deku, he's in there, he's taking the exam, he's saying, man, this is a lot easier than what I thought it would be. So he aces it. Now it's getting time for, it's time for the actual robot smashing deal. Everybody's lining up at the gate, and Deku, he's just chilling. And, this girl bumps into him. He looks back, and it's Uraraka, She says, oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to bump into you like that. And he's like, oh, no, it's cool. It's cool. And so, that's all he says to her. He turns back around. And, she's like, okay, that was a bit awkward, but oh well. And she moves on along. The gate opens, and Deku, he's going for it. He's enhanced his bodies, and he's just smashing robots apart. He doesn't care about the total point value. He's just going to make sure he's got enough to pass and enter. He's not really going to go for the top spot right now, because he is trying to keep his abilities on the down low. So that's pretty much what that's all about. And people just think he's got a strength quirk. That's pretty much it, because they don't see the green lines all the way down up his arm, just enhancing them and their strength, and he's just tearing them apart. And then it comes to the point of the 0-pointer. And everybody starts running. Deku, he's about to take off too, but then he hears, someone say, help, help. And he turns and looks, and he's like, oh shit, there's that girl that bumped into me today. He sees that she's trapped underneath the rubble, and he sees the 0-pointers going right for her. He's like, shit, if somebody don't do something, she's gonna die. Like, and he's like, oh, fuck it. He's like, I was aiming to be a hero of justice. This is a good chance of any. And he runs over there, He saves her, of course. But he's not taking on that giant machine. Like, he could destroy it rather easily. But he's not really trying to show off like that. So he just takes the rubble, throws it off of her, picks her up, puts her over his shoulder, and runs. And, Uraraka, she kind of embarrassed like this. And as soon as Deku gets outside the gate, he just sets her down and says, sorry, but, I wasn't trying to get trampled by that thing. And that was just the easiest position I could put you to run in. And she's like, oh, no, it's okay. Thank you for saving me. And he's like, can you walk? Or, he's like, I see you're kind of cut up on your legs there, She's like, oh, yeah, I should be fine. And that's when Recovery Girl, she comes out, she heals up Uraraka. And, everybody, they're just like blown back by the fact that giant ass robot was there. And, so Deku, he bounces, and she's like, is that it? Like, they say, yeah, that's it. So Deku, he bounces. He heads on back to his estate. And, that's pretty much it for the entrance exam. There was a lot of time before the actual, confirmation. So I'm going to say Deku, pretty much, he's just honing his skills even more. And, he gets his hollow vid, and, he's just like, oh, cool, I got in. And he's thinking about it. He's like, they're going to require me to wear a hero outfit. So he calls up the clock tower. He says, hey, can you guys make this type of outfit for me? They're like, what's the details on when you need it by? And Deku tells him he basically wants an all-black body armor type suit, sleeveless, with gloves that an archer could use, and just a little poncho type thing, cream colored. Basically, what he's ordering is, the picture right there, that outfit. And, they say, okay, yeah, we could have that done by that. So, he's like, okay, thank you. How much is it? They tell him he pays for it. Because, they ain't doing nothing for free. And so, it's time for them to, enter UA now. It's the first day. Deku, he's walking up there. He's confident. So, he's walking up there. And he gets there early. Because he wants to scope out the place. He wants to see what's going on. And plus, there's no one at home. And Deku, he does feel lonely a lot. Like, he is all alone. He has no friends. So, of course, he's just wanting to go. He's looking forward to going to school way more than anyone else could, just to escape that loneliness for a bit. Because Deku, no one took him in again, and he's got a giant house that's completely empty. Like, he's just, all he does with his time is just hone his skills, read Kiritsugu's, notes, and pretty much just try to incorporate Kiritsugu's magic into his own, or learn it the best he can and mitigate the effects of it. And so Deku, he's really looking forward to here. He gets there early and he's just like, oh, there's no one here. So he pretty much, he just picks a desk and, he sits on the front row all the way to the left by the window. He's just sitting there, he takes out a notebook, he starts writing stuff down in there. He's just writing. Like, there's no particular thing that he's just writing. He's just doing that to pass the time. And then people start entering and, they see him, First one enters the room is Ida. Because he's just like, oh, yes, I'm going to be the first one here and set the example. And then he sees Deku in there. He's like, oh, shit. Well, shit. And he recognizes him. He's like, oh, hey, you're from the entrance exam. He's like, oh, yeah, who are you? And, Ida, he's just like, oh, yeah, I didn't introduce myself. He's like, yeah, my name is Tenya Ida. Nice to meet you. I have an engine quirk. And Deku, he's like, oh, okay, cool. My name is Izuku Emiya. Nice to meet you. I don't have a quirk. He's like, what? You're quirkless? And you got into UA? Quirkless? Deku's like, well, yeah, pretty much. He's like, officially, they say I don't have a quirk, but I do have an ability of my own, And he was like, oh, okay, so they haven't updated yours yet. He's like, well, I don't even know if you could classify it as a quirk, And he's just like, huh? And he's just like, basically, I just have a strong body. And that's how I was able to just tear through that shit. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, man, and he's just thinking, man, this dude's like got a convoluted way of saying it. And Deku's like, man, I wish I could just tell somebody I'm a mage instead of them thinking I'm an invalid. So Deku, he's kind of upset about that, but he's accepting the fact, him and Ida, they get to talking, and Ida asks Deku, like, hey, why do you want to be a hero? What's your reasoning? And Deku, he basically tells him, if that he just wants to be a hero of justice. And he's like, well, and he is like, well, aren't all heroes on the side of justice? He's like, well, no, this is what I mean. He's like, that disaster that took place 11 years ago? And, he's like, disaster? He's like, yeah, the one where that only one kid survived. And Ida, he's pretty smart, so he puts it together. He's like, oh, you were that kid that survived. And Deku, he's like, yeah, basically, I want to make sure that can't happen ever again. And plus, my father, he wanted to be a hero of justice, but he was never able to achieve that. But he was a hero indeed. He's like, oh, was he a pro? He's like, no. He saved my life that day. And he's just like, oh, okay, I get it now. And so, and he's trying to question Deku more about it, like, what was it about, what was it like surviving that incident? Like, what was it like inside of that place? And Deku, he straight up says, like, man, I really don't want to talk about it. And he's just like, but man, he's like, and Deku tells him like, man, but I'm good at fixing things. So if you ever have something that's broken, or if you just need help doing something, I'll help you out. And he's like, okay, thanks for that. And so, and he asked you to keep quiet that, he was the kid that survived that incident. Like, he doesn't want people to really know that. And he was like, okay. And he's like, wait, should I call you Izuku or should I call you Emiya? And, he says, yeah, you can just call me whatever. I really don't care. He's like, all right, well, I'm just going to call you Emiya then. And he's just like, okay, cool. And Deku, he's just like, all right. And everybody else starts coming in. Uraraka, she comes in and she sees Deku. She immediately heads over there to him. And she's just like, hey. And Deku's like, oh, hey, yeah. How you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm good. Thank you again for saving me during the entrance exam. He's like, oh, it's all right. Everybody, they're starting to talk louder and louder. And Aizawa, he's just like, all right, y'all need to quiet down. I was trying to sleep, so sit down and shut up. And so they sit down, they shut up. And, Aizawa, he notices Deku over there. And he notices there's something different about him. And he says, okay, I'm going to go across here first, I'm going to ask you guys a few questions, and then we're going to go out and do quirk assessments. But really, he's just trying to get a gauge of Deku, because, growing up in Britain, Deku looks a bit different now. Like, he's been in another country for a very long amount of time. So he styles himself as that type of country style. So, because Deku, he's still out of touch with the Japanese style now. And so first person he calls on is Deku. And he says, stand up, state your name, and ask you some more questions about yourself. And Deku's like, okay. And so he says, my name is Izuku Emiya. And he's just like, Emiya, huh? Alright. Where are you from, Mr. Emiya? And Deku, he's like, well, I was born in Japan. But I've been out of the country for a while. I've been overseas doing school. And, I was always like, oh, where you go to school at? And he says like, oh, just someplace in England. And, I was like, oh, so you were overseas schooling? And he's like, yeah. He's like, what made you come back? He's like, well, I wanted to be a hero, and UA is, some of the best heroes come from UA. And on top of that, I was wanting to come back to, Japan myself. My father did leave me his house, and, and Aizawa, he kind of catches that. He's like, he left you his house. He's like, is your father still overseas? And he's like, oh no, I don't have a father. And, Aizawa, he's kind of shocked to hear that. He's like, oh. Deku said, yeah, he died of a sickness when I was younger. I went overseas by myself to go to a boarding school. And he was just like, oh, okay. So he's not wanting to really open that all up right now. So he decides to move on to the rest of the people. He didn't even ask Deku why he wanted to be a hero. And the other kids in the class, they hear that and they're kind of wanting to steer clear of Deku now. Like, they're just thinking that's a whole lot of drama and baggage they don't want to really deal with. And Bakugo, he's thinking there's something familiar about him. Like, somewhere in that story, it sounds familiar. The name Izuku, he knew someone named that, but their last name was Midoriya, not Emiya. So he's not really gonna ask too many questions about that. And so he's like, alright, so time to go do our quirk assessments. And so they do. They go out and they're doing their quirk assessments now. And Deku, he changed and he's one of the first ones out there on the field because changing clothes is something that he's had to do a lot. And, he's gotten really quick with it because at the clock tower, whenever he had to do physical training, they had him change his clothes and they'd be on his ass if he took too long. So that's where he's coming from. And people are just like, damn, dude, like, how fast are you at changing clothes? And he's just like, oh, that's just a habit. And he exits. He gets on there, and so I'm gonna say, as always, he's going over their placements, and I'm gonna say Deku, he scored 5th overall. People are looking at him like, dang, he scored 5th. He must have a strong quirk, at least. And so first off is Bakugo. He gets 700 meters. And people are just like, well, damn, 700 meters, shit. Next up is Todoroki. He gets about 600. People just like, shit, okay. And, other people go, and then there's a Deku. Deku, he strengthens his body up. And I saw he tries to erase his quirk, but he realizes nothing's happening. He can't erase it. Deku throws that ball, and boom, he ties Bakugo 700 meters. And everybody looks shocked. They're like, damn. He tied for first place with 700 meters? And Deku's like, oh shit, I overshot that. He's like, I strengthened too much. And Aizawa asked him, what's your quirk? He's like, I tried erasing your quirk, but I couldn't. He's like, what is your quirk? And Deku tells him, I'm quirkless. I just got a strong body. That's all. And Aizawa, he's not really buying that, but that is what's on the paper. So he just asks, what were those green lines on your hand? And he's like, what green lines? He shows him his hands. There's no green lines. He's like, I think you were just hallucinating something. Maybe you need to get more sleep. And so he's getting a little irritated at this. And Deku's just like, man, this is one persistent dude. So Uraraka, she scores number 1 in there with Infinity. Because she just got that power like that. Deku, he makes sure he just scores lower in the other categories because he's not wanting to like really show off like that. He's wanting to draw the least amount of attention to himself as possible. He wants to make himself seem very average at best. So I was always like, okay, well, kid's just got a strong throwing arm. There ain't nothing else really that amazing about him. So, alright. Class dismissed. And I thought he's like, I need to look into that guy. That Emiya fellow. Deku, he's going off. But someone catches him right before they leave. And it's Sue. It's Asui. And she's like, oh, hey. And he's like, oh, hey, it's you. And Uraraka, she's seeing this. She's walking up. She's like, oh, do you two know each other? He's like, oh, no, I helped her out this one time. And Asui said, yeah, he saved me from a gang of dudes that was harassing me and bullying me. He's like, Uraraka, she's shocked to hear this. She's like, oh? She tells him, like, yeah, he beat them up like it was nothing. He's a very good fighter. And Uraraka, she kind of shocked. And so he says, I never got to properly thank you for that. And, Deku, he's just like, yeah, it's all right. And he's like, but you want to walk and talk about this? And so she's kind of confused, like, what? Why? And he's just like, oh, our teacher's just freaking me out. That's all. I don't really want to be around here with him because he might be stalking. And so she's like, yeah, all right, let's go. And he has Uraraka if she wants to come too. And she ain't doing nothing. And, Uraraka says, all right, yeah, sure. Deku says, well, I'm about to go out and get something to eat. I know this ramen joint. It's not far from here. Y'all want to join me? And they say, yeah, sure. But Asui's like, oh, I don't have, that much money, so I'll probably just get something to drink. And Deku's like, oh, no, I'll pay for y'all's. And she's just like, you sure? He's like, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. I got enough. And, they get to the restaurant. They're looking at the menus, and they're like, so, and Deku says, yeah, just get whatever you want. I got it. And they're like, oh, okay. So they both order their ramen, and Deku, he orders his spicy ramen. And, lo and behold, the man who's serving them, Kirei Kotomine. That motherfucker. Deku, he's thinking that too. He's like, this motherfucker works at a ramen shop and a fucking church? What type of priest is he? And, he looks at Deku and he's just like, oh, we meet again. And the girls, they're kind of shocked. They're like, oh, you know this guy? And Deku's like, oh, he's just a priest at a church I go to. Isn't that right, priest Kotomine? And, he's like, oh, yes, but I'm also a very talented chef, making these spicy ramen is my favorite. And so, he's just like, well, enjoy your meal. Let me know if there's anything else you could need. And so, Deku, he's just like, this dude is gonna be a problem. I have got to find somewhere else to go. And so, they're eating, they're talking, and they ask Deku about what his childhood was like. And Deku, he's like, I don't really want to talk about that, but only thing I'm gonna say is that it was lonely. And, Deku, they're like, what, lonely? Why? And Deku's like, well, I'm an orphan. And they're just like, oh. He's like, I ain't got no brothers, no sisters, just a house to myself. That's it. And, they feel bad now bringing that up. And, Deku's like, oh, don't worry about it. Let's just eat and talk about other stuff. And also we ask him if he's really quirkless. And he says, like, yeah, I'm really quirkless, And he's not lying. He is quirkless. But he does got to compensate. And Uraraka, she's like, well, you are really strong for a quirkless guy. And he's like, well, I have been training myself practically my whole life. Overseas, I took a some sports and activities to help train my body. I learned how to defend myself. And he's just like, it's part of being a hero. And they're asking him how England was, and he says like, oh, it was great, very lovely country over there. He says the only bad thing is it's pretty expensive to live over there. And so, they're like, yeah, we can tell you're kind of used to living over there because the way you talk. And he's like, the way I talk. He's like, yeah, you have sort of like a foreign accent to your Japanese now. He's like, oh yeah, that's to be expected. He's like, I was speaking in English over there for years, so yeah, that's kind of to be expected. So they talk and they eventually go. Deku, he goes back to his house and he's like, alone again. But he's not alone for long. Here's a knock on his door. He goes to check it, and he sees this short, white-haired girl wearing winter clothes of all things, wearing a fur hat. She's got really pale white skin and red eyes. And he says like, who are you? And she says, oh, my name is Ilya von Eisenberg. And she's like, and I'm your half sister. And Deku, he's just like, wait, what? And she's like, oh yeah, Emiya was my father. And Deku, he's shocked to hear this. And she's like, I've actually hated you for quite a long time now. Instead of coming back home to me, my father chose to adopt you and play family with you. And Deku, he's getting kind of mad about that, but he's willing to hear her out. He says, well, come on in, I'll fix you some tea and we can talk about this. And so Ilya, she's more than happy to. And besides, she really can't be out on the streets that late because her housemates are scouring the area looking for her. So she enters and she says, hurry up and shut the door. It's kind of cold out there. He's like, you think that's cold? Jeez. So he closes the door. They go to the kitchen area. She's sitting at the table. And, Deku, he's making some tea. And he's like, so, how old are you? Because you look a lot younger than what I am. But I'm guessing you're not quite that young. Man, Helia says, no, I'm not quite that young. She says, I am 18 after all. And Deku's like, wait, you're older than me by 2 years? You look like an elementary school kid. And she's like, no, I am definitely 18. And she shows him her identification. It's like 18. Okay. And she's just like, yep, that makes me your big sister. And Deku, he's like, well then. He's like, And she's like, what? And he's just like, I wonder if there is anything in, Kiritsu's, notes about you. And she's just like, wait, you have his notes here? And Deku's like, oh, yeah, he left them here. He did die in this house. And she's like, he died here? She was like, yeah, he died of an illness. And, Ilya's kind of frustrated to hear that. And, She asked Deku, how was he, as a father? And Deku said, they had their warm moments, but for the most part, looking back, he was pretty cold to him. The only time they only had a real heart to heart once, but other than that, it was strictly just like training him and teaching him magecraft and stuff like that. And he never really brought any other people over, so he never got to really meet anyone. Going to school was the only way he met people, but he still didn't really meet any friends. And Emiya says, "Oh, is that so?" And he's like, "Yeah." She's like, "It seems you didn't have too much of a different childhood than what I did." And she's just like, "So, who was your mother?" And Deku, he's just like, "Well, truth is, Kiritsugu adopted me, but my mother wasn't anybody special, but she was a hero." And Ilya, she's like, "How was she a hero?" And she said, "Well, she pushed me out of the way from a falling building, and she got crushed, saving my life. And I watched the building crush her." And Ilya, she gets that this dude's seen some shit. And, he's told her, like, walking all the way down through that burnt ground, the fire on the sides all around him, the pools of blood, and just when he was so exhausted, he collapsed and got trapped under some rubble. He thought he was gonna die there. And then there came Kiritsugu, pulling the rubble away, looking at him with tears running down his face, smiling and saying, "Oh, thank God, I found one. There is one person still alive. Thank God I found you." And that he hugged him with tears and he kept saying, "Thank God he found me." He looked so happy to have found just one person alive. And that even before, he adopted him, he admired him for that. He had a lot of admiration for Kiritsugu. And Ilya, she's wanting to say something, but Deku, he keeps talking, and he's like, "That's what it started out at least." And, he says, "I know all about his past now. He was a killer, sent out to kill other mages. That's what he specialized in. I knew he married someone, but I didn't know they had a child, or else I would have tried looking for you sooner." And Ilya, she says, "You wouldn't have been able to find me. The place I'm staying at doesn't really like me wandering out or anyone coming in." And she's just like, And she asks him, like, "What type of magic did he teach you?" And Deku, he says, "Just projection and strengthening magic. That's it." And she asks, "What magic did you learn from his notes?" And Deku, he's telling her because, that is his sister. He says, "I learned the time acceleration magic." And she's like, "Oh, are you actually going to use that?" And Deku, he's like, "Well, yeah." And eventually, after I figure out a way to mitigate the consequences of it, and she basically tells him, he used that all his life, and he still lived until he was in his mid to late 30s, almost his 40s. And, Deku, he's like, yeah, I know. But still, I need to be able to have a longer life than that. And Emiya says, I have a feeling you'll use it one day, whether you perfected it or not. After all, you've had to been practicing with it since you took the time to learn it. And Deku, he's like, yeah, I have been practicing it, so I have been using it. And, she's like, what else do you know? He's like, archery, swordsmanship. That's pretty much it. Besides hand-to-hand combat. She's like, oh, okay. And she straight up asks him, are you going to participate in the Holy Grail War? And his eyes grow wide, and he's like, the what? And she's like, oh yeah, the Holy Grail War. There's some masters conspiring to, have another one. In Japan, again. And, Dagu's like, you can't be serious. He's thinking she's gotta be lying. But then she shows him her hand and the marking on it. And he knows from the notes what those markings are. He's like, don't tell me. Is that a command seal? And she's just like, yep, I have the Berserker class. And Deku, he's just like, no, this can't be happening. And he's like, what Berserker did you summon? And she's like, I'm not going to answer that until you answer mine. And Deku, he straight up tells her, no, I have no intention of competing in this Holy Grail War of yours. Just stopping it from ever taking place. And Emiya, she kind of smiles at that. And she's like, Because she knows, she's not stupid. She knows she's going to be used as the Holy Grail if things don't change. So she's trying to secure herself some allies to kind of give her the best odds of survival. And she sees, her adopted brother has quite the ally to have to increase her odds. Since he can do long-ranged and up-close magic, she knows, and he knows some of, Kiritsugu's own magic that made him so formidable. She's seeing him as an absolute plus. And, she's like, okay, I'll tell you who I have. And, he says, who? She says, I've summoned Heracles, an A-class or S-class, depending on how you want to look at it, servant. And Deku, he's just trembling. He's just like, oh my god. And she's just like, are you scared? And he's like, I've fought servants before, yeah. And she's like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, I fought D and C class servants for training all the time. And they were hard as fuck. Literal historical figures and some godly beings I've had to fight. But they were all, not very powerful. Only the, bottom of the barrel. And he's like, but you have one that high up on the list. He's like, you're damn right I'm terrified. I don't want to fight that thing. And, Deku, he runs back there, and Ilya, she follows him. And, he gets his briefcase out. He opens it up. He sees his suit there. He starts gearing up, and she's just like, oh? And Deku's like, yeah, oh, we're going to go see somebody right now. And that's where I'm going to leave it off for today. So if you have any comments or, feedback, any recommendations, leave it down in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.